everyone. I'm Lara Roney, Research Assistant for Italian Art at the Detroit Institute of Arts, here to bring you an up-close and personal work at a great highlight from the DIA's collection. Lately, my research has focused on the many great Italian women artists who practiced professionally as painters, sculptors, and printmakers during the Italian Renaissance and beyond. And as I've been delving into these great women artists, I got to thinking about some of the other ways that women acted as major power players in the early modern European world, not only in cultural and artistic spheres, but politically as well. And I thought, what better work of art to turn to than one of my absolute favorites, the DIA's stunning portrait of Eleonora of Toledo with her son, attributed to the workshop of Agnolo Bronzino. Bronzino was court painter to Cosimo de' Medici, who was Duke of Florence from 1537 to 1569. He was later named Grand Duke of Tuscany, which is how you see him depicted here in this portrait bust you might recognize from our Medici gallery. But at the beginning of Cosimo's reign, he sat in a somewhat precarious position, politically speaking, because he was not born to rule. He was the son of a soldier, and he came from a sort of secondary branch of the Medici family. So, long story short, Cosimo had to work doubly hard in order to legitimize his position as ruler of Florence. Enter Eleonora of Toledo, whom Cosimo married in 1539. Eleonora was the daughter of the Spanish Viceroy of Naples, who was appointed by Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, and one of the most powerful men in Europe. So, in marrying Cosimo, Eleonora brought a great deal of stability to Cosimo's reign, thanks to her very powerful political allegiances. Now, not only was Eleonora very wealthy and well connected, but she was also a landowner in her own right. She ruled Florence in her husband's stead during times of war when he was away from the city. She personally financed her family's purchase of a bigger palace where she and her many children could be more comfortable. She had 11 children within 14 years, not all of whom survived, but who were, of course, crucial because they guaranteed the succession of the Medici dynasty. Here she appears with her second son, Giovanni, who was not the heir because he had an older brother. He was sort of more the safety net heir, if you will. But here, Giovanni appears as this, very dignified little toddler, dressed to the nines, like a miniature adult in that way that really only Italian children can. But here he almost appears as more of an attribute of Eleonora, the mother and the guarantor of the perpetuation of Medici rule, which is really what this painting truly celebrates. Made in the workshop of Agnolo Bronzino, this is a replica of what was the most famous state portrait of Eleonora. And state portraits always come with a little element of propaganda because they were replicated and sent to courts all throughout Europe as diplomatic gifts and tokens of allegiance. So, as a patron, your state portrait was really your chance to control your public image, how others saw you, and really show off your status. So I think what we notice immediately here about Eleonora is just how regal she looks, how almost impossibly pristine her pearlescent skin and features are, how almost really unapproachably dignified she appears. She was a very tiny person, but she almost seems to loom over us here, as is appropriate for this woman who loomed large politically as the very powerful duchess that she was. Now, a lot of people look at this painting and they say she appears somewhat cold, maybe a little bit aloof looking, and they wonder, because this is a portrait of her as a mother, where is her motherly warmth? Well, we know she had it. A very gossipy Venetian ambassador, writing home about all the things he'd seen at Cosimo's court, talked about seeing the Duke and Duchess and all of their children eating dinner, dining together at the same table, sort of throwing out the rule book of courtly etiquette and dining together as a family, almost in a way that a sort of country peasant family might do. And I think if you look really hard within this portrait, you do see a few little hints of that sort of motherly familial warmth, the way that she just very protectively places her arm around Giovanni, and how he just ever so slightly sort of leans in onto her thigh, the way that a real child might, right? If he's standing for a long portrait sitting. And I just adore the way his chubby little hand sort of rests right there on top of her dress. Now, that dress, this unforgettable dress with those beautiful black velvet arabesque motifs over a white satin ground. This dress is a veritable advertisement for Cosimo's revitalization of the silk industry in Florence, which was one of the city's greatest economic assets. Eleonora even had at her own disposal a weaving workshop right there in her palace, which was headed by a woman, Francesca di Donato, who we know lived in the palace and was on the palace payroll. So obviously, she too held a very prestigious position. And this woman, Francesca di Donato, was known especially for making cloth of gold, where actual spun gold is woven right into the material, which not only required very complicated weaving processes, but also a good deal of physical strength. And here on Eleonora's dress, we see these very conspicuous gold brocade pomegranate motifs. Pomegranates are traditional symbols of fertility. So, of course, here in a dynastic portrait, that symbolism is lost on no one. Now, the burning question, right? Did this famous dress really exist? Eleonora was depicted wearing it more than once. And in fact, archival research presented by Sheila Barker of the Medici Archive Project has actually been able to reconstruct the history of this fabric, which was purchased from within the Florentine duchy and at great expense. The fabric alone cost the equivalent of about $48,000. Now, not all of the fabric was used to create just this one dress, but just imagine the sheer yardage, the amount of fabric that the construction of a dress like this would take, right? The construction of the dress itself took 3 years. And so obviously, it was a monumental undertaking, and the dress itself is really a work of art in its own right. Eleonora must have been pleased with the result, and surely she was pleased here with the painter Bronzino, who I think just masterfully is able to capture the luminosity, right, the luxurious texture of this truly stunning garment. And by the way, Bronzino was paid very well for his efforts here, supposedly receiving the same salary as Eleonora's personal tailor. So who could resist just a few more details here? Notice Eleonora is absolutely dripping with pearls, right? You see pearls on the hairnet she wears, beautiful pearl earrings. She has pearls on the sort of open work gold weave of her partlet, which is the sort of collar area of her dress. These gorgeous pearl necklaces, right? And then she has this amazing sort of jeweled girdle, this belt, which culminates in this tassel of just countless strands of these beautiful seed pearls. And I love the way those strands of pearls just sort of twist as they fall over the texture of her gown, giving just the slightest hint of movement to this otherwise very still portrait. Pearls, I think, must have been a favorite of Eleonora. She received a pearl necklace from Cosimo as a wedding gift, and Cosimo's mother, so Eleonora's mother-in-law, actually sent her 50 Venetian pearls as a sort of pre-marriage gift in order to kind of sweeten the deal for Eleonora having to leave behind her home in Naples and move to Florence to marry her son, right, this sort of upstart duke. And the mother-in-law actually promised Eleonora 150 additional pearls once she arrived in Florence. So very smart move there on the part of Cosimo's mother. Now, because this image of Eleonora, and particularly that dress, is such an icon, it for a long time generated a sort of romantic misconception that she must have been buried in this dress when she died in 1562. Now, sadly, we have to sort of debunk this whole idea because in 1857, the bodies of Eleonora and several other of the members of the Medici family were exhumed in order to sort of rebury them because it was discovered that their above ground tombs had been pillaged, and so they had to sort of safely rebury them underground. And during this process, it was discovered that Eleonora was in fact buried in a very different looking dress, which is actually conserved today at the Costume Gallery of Palazzo Pitti in Florence. So while she wasn't buried in this fabulous dress, as we sort of romantically hope she might have been, I think it all still makes for a pretty great story. And actually, a couple years ago, I was in the DIA galleries with a very good friend of mine who had invented this game where she would sort of pick out a work of art in one of the galleries, and I would have to either tell her something true about the work of art or completely make up something to say about it. And she would have to guess whether what I told her was true or not. And of course, the more unbelievable true story I could come up with, the better the game got. And when I told her this story of Eleonora and the exhumation of the Medici and the dress, she, was so convinced that I had made the story up, right? It was just that macabre and just that unbelievable. Um, but now I'll always have this great memory of sort of having a laugh in the gallery with my friend, and it's moments like that that I really miss right now, being away from the museum. And I hope that it's not too long before we'll all be back and you will all be back with us to have these kinds of experiences where we're enjoying each other's company while we enjoy the amazing collection of the DIA. So thank you for joining me today, and we'll hope to see you very soon.